The crack of a leather footy hitting your knuckles in the schoolyard. The smell of zinc cream and salt water mixed with chip grease at the beach. The sound of your mate's older brother's panel van rumbling down the street. Bad Company blasting from the 8-track. If you were a boy growing up in 1970s Australia, you don't just remember these things. You can still feel them, can't you? Back then, boyhood was raw. Unsupervised. A daily test of courage, maturity, and how much trouble you could get into before tea time. We roamed free. We built things. We broke things. And we became men in the process, whether we were ready or not. Today we are diving back into 15 memories that only make sense if you were an Australian boy in the 70s. This is the big one. The moment you crossed from little kid to proper boy. Your old man handed you a pocket knife, usually for your 10th or 11th birthday, and suddenly you were part of the club. It wasn't just a knife. It was trust. It was responsibility. It meant your dad thought you were old enough to handle something sharp, something dangerous, something real. You'd practice opening it behind the shed, carving your initials into fence posts, whittling sticks into nothing in particular. At school, if you had a Swiss Army knife with the little scissors and screwdriver, you were basically royalty. Blokes would gather around at lunchtime, comparing blades, testing the sharpness, showing off the things they'd made. Nobody panicked. Nobody called the cops. It was just understood that boys had knives, and they learned to use them properly. You'd cut yourself eventually, of course you would. And your dad would say something like, "That'll teach YA," and that was that. These days, you'd probably get expelled just for bringing one to school. But back then, it was part of growing up. Learning respect for tools, for danger, for the line between stupid and brave. Every boy worth his salt built a Billycart. You'd scrounge old pram wheels from someone's garage, find a plank of wood, maybe nick a few nails from your dad's shed, and you were in business.
No instructions. No YouTube tutorials.
Just trial, error, and the occasional spectacular failure. The real test was the hill. The steeper, the better. You'd haul that cart to the top, your mates beside you with theirs, and someone would yell "G.O." Down you'd fly, no brakes, no helmet, just pure speed and the wind screaming in your ears. Sometimes you'd bail before the bottom. Sometimes you'd stack it spectacularly, wheels flying off, skinned knees, torn shorts. Your mates would laugh their heads off, and you'd laugh too, because next time you'd beat them. There were no safety regulations. No parents hovering with band-aids. Just boys, wood, and gravity. And when you finally got that cart to make it all the way down without falling apart, mate, that was victory. That was engineering. That was boyhood at its finest. Number 3. Collecting footy cards and swapping them in the schoolyard. Before video games, before phones, there were footy cards. Scanlens, usually, with that horrible pink stick of gum that tasted like cardboard but you chewed it anyway. You'd rip open the pack, scan for your team, and if you got a star player, Ron Barassi, Lee Matthews, you were made. The schoolyard was the trading floor. Got, need, got. You'd swap doubles, negotiate deals, try to swindle some poor kid out of his prize card with a handful of commons. Everyone had a collection. Kept in a showbox, rubber banded together, treasured like gold. You'd memorize the stats on the back. Goals kicked, games played, height, weight. You knew more about your favorite players than you did about your own family. And if someone had a card you desperately wanted, you'd trade your lunch, your pocket money, your dignity. Those cards weren't just bits of cardboard. They were currency. They were status. They were everything. If you didn't have a dragster bike with high-rise handlebars and a banana seat, were you even a boy in the 70s? Those bikes were freedom on 2 wheels. You'd customize them, add playing cards in the spokes for that motorcycle sound, maybe get a sissy bar if you were flash. You'd ride everywhere. To school, to the shops, to your mate's place 3 suburbs over.
No Elmer, no Leites, no Voorhees.
You'd do jumps off homemade ramps, skid around corners, pop wheelies down the street trying to impress the girls who pretended not to notice. Your bike was your identity. Chrome forks, long forks if you were lucky. You'd spend hours polishing it, adjusting the seat, making it perfect. And when you were riding, wind in your hair, no hands on the handlebars, you weren't just a kid from the suburbs. You were Evil Knievel. You were invincible. There was no anti-bullying policy.
No mediation.
If you had beef with another bloke, you sorted it out. Usually behind the toilets or at the Oval after school. Word would spread like wildfire. Fight at 3:30. Everyone would gather in a circle, and you'd go at it. It wasn't pretty. Mostly pushing, maybe a few wild swings, someone ending up on the ground. But here's the thing, afterward, it was done. You'd shake hands, maybe even become mates.
No gralles.
No drama dragging on for weeks. You fought, you moved on. Teachers would break it up if they caught you, give you detention, maybe a caning if your school still did that. Your parents would find out, and your dad would probably just ask if you won. There was an understanding that boys fought. It was part of learning where the boundaries were, how to stand up for yourself, how to take a hit and keep going. If you wanted something, you earned it. That Sharon leather footy or Grey Nichols cricket but didn't just appear. You'd mow lawns, wash cars, do odd jobs around the neighborhood, stashing coins in a tin until you had enough. The day you finally walked into the sports shop and bought it with your own money, that was pride. Real pride. Not handed to you, not a present, earned. You'd carry that footy or bat home like it was made of solid gold. And you'd treat it right, oil the leather, wrap the handle, because you knew what it cost. Not just in dollars, but in time, in sweat, in effort. That taught you something. That things worth having were things worth working for. And when you finally got out to the oval with your own gear, playing with your mates, it felt different. Better. Because it was truly yours. Saturday morning, you'd disappear. No mobile phones. No check-ins. Just I'm going to the creek and off you went. You'd spend hours out there, climbing trees, building cubby houses, catching your bees with a bit of meat on a string. The bush was your kingdom. You'd explore drainage pipes, crawl through thorny scrub, maybe find an old shack or a rope swing someone had rigged up. You'd come home covered in mud, scratches all over your legs, possibly bleeding, and your mom would just shake her head and tell you to wash up for tea. There was danger, sure. Snakes, spiders, the occasional bull if you wandered too far. But that was part of it. Learning to read the land, to watch where you stepped, to respect nature. You weren't wrapped in cotton wool. You were let loose to figure it out. And somehow, we all survived. Saturday afternoon was sacred. The footy was on, and you sat with your dad in front of the telly, learning the game by osmosis. He'd explain the rules, point out the tactics, yell at the umpire for being a bloody idiot. You'd absorb it all. The passion, the tribal loyalty, the way grown men could go from mates to enemies depending on which team they barracked for. If your team won, the whole weekend was golden. If they lost, the house was quiet until Monday. Going to a live game was the ultimate. Your dad would take you, lift you over the turnstile if you were small enough, and you'd stand on the terraces, crushed in with thousands of other blokes, the smell of meat pies and beer, the roar of the crowd when someone kicked a goal. Those moments with your old man, they weren't just about footy. They were about becoming part of something bigger.
A tradition.
A legacy. Number 9. Getting the cane at school and not daring to tell your parents. The cane was real. If you mucked up, talked back, or got caught doing something stupid, you'd get sent to the headmaster's office. You'd wait outside, heart pounding, knowing what was coming. The cane would come down, sharp and stinging, and you'd bite your lip to keep from crying because crying was worse than the pain. Afterward, you'd walk back to class with your hands throbbing, trying not to let on how much it hurt. And here's the kicker, you wouldn't tell your parents. Because if you got the cane at school, you'd probably get another hiding at home for whatever you did to deserve it in the first place. So you kept your mouth shut, rubbed your palms when no one was looking, and learned pretty quick not to do that again. It was brutal, sure, but it taught you consequences. Fast. Every boy had a Shanghai. A wooden Y-shaped stick, some rubber tubing from an old bike inner tube, and a leather pouch. You'd spend hours perfecting your aim, shooting at tin cans, bottles, or if you were brave and stupid, the neighbor's cat. You'd roam the streets with your mates, Shanghais in your back pockets, looking for targets. A street light, maybe. A sign. Anything that seemed like a challenge. If you got caught, you'd cop it. But most of the time, you got away with it. It was dangerous, of course. Someone always managed to shoot themselves in the foot or hit their mate in the back of the head. But that was the lesson. You learned real quick to respect the Shanghai, to aim carefully, to think before you fired. No one sued anyone. No one called the police. It was just boys being boys. Camping wasn't something you did with your parents at a caravan park. It was something you did in your own backyard with your mates. You'd pitch a tent, grab your sleeping bags, maybe a torch and a few comics, and declare yourselves independent for the night. You'd tell ghost stories, scoff down lollies you'd smuggled out, and listen to every sound in the dark, convinced something was out there. Maybe a possum. Maybe a serial killer. Probably just the neighbor's dog. By 2 a.m., someone would chicken out and go inside. The rest of you would tough it out, waking up cold, stiff, and covered in mosquito bites, but triumphant. Because you'd done it. You'd survived the night. And on Monday at school, you'd have bragging rights. Saturday morning, your old man would be under the bonnet of the Holden, sleeves rolled up, grease on his hands, and he'd call you over. Pass me that spanner, Will Y.A. And just like that, you were his apprentice. You'd hand him tools, hold the torch, learn the names of parts you'd never need to know again. Carby, distributor, spark plugs. He'd explain what he was doing, not because you asked, but because that's how knowledge got passed down. Father to son. Sometimes you'd help him change the oil, lying on your back under the car, the concrete cold against your shoulders. Other times you'd just watch, mesmerized by the way he could take something broken and make it work again. Those moments weren't about cars. They were about being trusted, being needed, being taught what it meant to be capable. The backyard was the MCG. You'd mark out your pitch, grab the bat, and suddenly you were Greg Chappell facing Dennis Lillee. Your little brother was the fielder, your mate was the bowler, and your mum's garden was the boundary. You'd bat for hours, calling your own score, arguing over LBWs, and absolutely smashing it when you connected properly. Then inevitably, someone would hit it too hard, and crack. The neighbor's window would shatter, or worse, your own. Everyone would scatter. Deny everything. Blame the dog. But your parents always knew. And you'd spend the next few weekends mowing lawns to pay for the replacement glass. Still, the next Saturday, you'd be out there again. Because test cricket in the backyard wasn't optional. It was compulsory. Your older brother had the records. AC/DC, Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple, Rose Tattoo. He'd told you 100 times not to touch them, but the second he left the house, you were in his room. You'd carefully slide the vinyl out of the sleeve, place it on the turntable, drop the needle, and let it rip. The sound would fill the room, louder than you'd ever been allowed, and for those few minutes, you weren't a kid. You were a rock god. You'd air guitar along, jumping on the bed, until you heard the front door. Then you'd scramble to put everything back exactly as you found it, praying he wouldn't notice. Usually, he did. And you'd cop a whack. But it was worth it. Because that music, that raw, unapologetic sound, it was the soundtrack to rebellion. And you were hooked. Here's the truth. Growing up as an Australian boy in the 70s was rough. It was dangerous. It was unsupervised. And it was bloody brilliant. We didn't have much. No fancy toys, no technology, no internet safety nets. But we had freedom. Real freedom. We learned by doing. By falling. By getting back up. We weren't coddled or protected from every little risk. We were thrown into the deep end and told to swim. And we did. We became resilient. Resourceful. Tough as nails. Those 15 memories, they're not just nostalgia. They're proof that we lived. We didn't sit inside staring at screens. We were out there, in the dirt, in the streets, in the thick of it. And we came out the other side stronger for it. Life wasn't easy in the 70s. It wasn't perfect. But it was real. It was lived with scraped knees, bloody noses, and hearts full of adventure. We didn't need much to be happy. A bike, a footy, a mate who had your back. That was enough.